All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Gridiron Gurus podcast. Me and Nick here are going to be doing Washington Commanders 7-round mock draft. Now, this is a team that doesn't have a whole lot of draft capital, but we're still going to see what we can put together for this football team that's still promising, coming off a championship game appearance just 2 years ago. A lot of the mocks I did for the Commanders, I had them taking Ruben Bain in every single one of them, right? Because edge was a big problem for this team. Well, that was before free agency. They went out and added three pass rushers, including two big ticket ones, Odawe, Offway. Okay, I said that backwards. Adafe Owe and Kayvon Chazon, who had spectacular seasons last fall for their respective ball clubs. So edge is no longer a need really for Washington. So I think they need to transition to receiver. And people don't seem to talk about this enough, how bad of a receiving group this truly is. Terry McLaurin, of course, is a top tier pass catcher. Other than that, though, you're putting stock in Traylon Burks, Van Jefferson, and Dwami Brown comes back after having a disappointing season in Jacksonville. Then Luke McCaffrey, I think, can still be a good pass catcher. Same with Jalen Lane. But in terms of top tier talent, Nick, they just do not have it. And that's where Carnell Tate would make a lot of sense for this team in the first round. A detailed route runner, nice long strider, sets up defensive backs, strong hands, and focus to win anywhere on the field. Good football IQ, competitive blocker as well. I mean, this guy is just very good at a lot of different things when it comes to being a football player. I mean, he's a technician at the end of the day coming from Ohio State. These guys are typically the best at what they do, right? He doesn't have great speed. He can definitely struggle at times versus press due to lack of overall explosiveness. And then yards after catch isn't really his strong suit either. But you need someone who's going to go out there, catch the football, Nick, and be productive doing it. And Tate's going to fit that bill tremendously for this offense. So I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on a wide receiver. And I think the top one available is going to fall in their hands.
There's a lot I like about Washington, but its wide receiving core is not one of those things. I think Terry McLaurin's a phenomenal receiver. Obviously, he's had a great career and he is an incredible top guy. But outside of that, Jaden Daniels does not have great pieces to throw to. I think there's potential with Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey, but I think these are guys that still have a lot of room to grow. I mean, Traylon Burks getting top minutes for this team is got to be a concern if you're a Washington fan. I know he had that great catch against the Broncos on Sunday Night Football, but outside of that, I mean, Traylon Burks just has not had a great career after bouncing around and ending up in Washington, and he just should not be a guy that should be getting top minutes for a wide receiving group. So that's where I think Carnell Tate comes in. They address the issue at edge with those two guys that you mentioned they added from the Chargers and the Patriots. Those are two great adds at left and right edge there. They'll get some pass rush out of those guys who will be big key assets. But now they got to address wide receiver. I think Carnell Tate is a phenomenal player to add off the board. One of the best wide receivers in this class, if not the best wide receiver in this class. Last year, 875, 17.2 yards per grab, 9 scores on 51 receptions. He was really good for Ohio State last year. He was good the year prior to that, had 730 yards and 4 scores in that season. I think he is a player that profiles really well. Highest floor, one of the highest floors of the players, certainly of true juniors in this draft class. He's got great hands, very reliable track record. He's a really solid blocker as well. Great route running. I think he can certainly develop a route tree that is high level in the NFL, 6'3", 195. He can do a lot. I think he'd be a phenomenal add for this Commanders team that needs to give their young quarterback some weapons. I think Jaden Daniels obviously has an incredible amount of potential. Got to give him some weapons, got to give him some assets to throw to. I think Carnell Tate would be a phenomenal one to start with.
Now you look at their next selection, they only have two picks in the first 4 rounds, which isn't great. I don't know if they want to invest in moving up a whole lot. So they're going to have to wait a long time till their next selection in the 3rd round. And I think they need to focus on defensive tackle. This is a team that was horrible against the run last year. Bringing some of those DNs in, of course, should definitely help. But overall, they just got underwhelming play out of their defensive tackles. And Grayson Halton is a guy who's had a phenomenal draft process, who shined at the combine, showcasing that he's an athletic freak of nature, high end motor, really impressive twitch, has improved his pass rushing skill set as well. He's only 6'2", 290, so he's definitely a little bit undersized, but he has nice power at the point of attack. I think he can definitely help get in there and create some havoc when it comes to slowing down the run. He's not the top tier. He's not the top tier run defender like some of the other guys are in this class at his position, but he's a player that I think with those traits, like the motor and the athletic profile, are really going to allow him to be a standout player in the NFL. And I think that the Commanders would be glad to have him. Now, is he going to fall this far to them? That's the biggest question mark for me, but in this mock, he thankfully did. So we'll see what happens, but I think this makes a lot of sense.
I think Halton's a phenomenal player. If he could follow them, that'd be really good for this team. I think they really need to work on their interior defensive line. Deron Payne's a solid player. But he's getting a little bit older. Javon Kinlaw's a solid player as well, but I think they need to do a little bit of work here and kind of get some more depth on this defensive line. I like what Halton can do. He was solid last year, 420 snaps for Oklahoma, had 5 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, 22 quarterback hurries. They moved him around a little bit. They got some solid use out of him in a couple different situations and sort of setups. And in Norman, I think he's a solid player, right? I think he's a little bit undersized, certainly, but he's versatile. He can move him. Like I said, they played him in a bunch of different alignments. He's really solid. I think the speed is good on him as well. Really good quickness. 6'2", 290. I think he's certainly an interesting prospect. I think get him at 71. I think that's really good value, and he could be a really good key asset for this defensive line.
Now we move to our second slide here. They have four selections on day three, starting things off in the fifth round. Thaddeus Dixon at cornerback. This is a player that has some good versatility. He's played all over the defense in the secondary in his career. Strong eye discipline, good anticipation at the top of routes. I think he locates the ball pretty well. Good downhill burst, but he does need to improve his angles when it comes to being a run defender. And sometimes the footwork and man coverage can show some inconsistent balance, which can lead to him, getting beat, of course. He did work with the Belichicks, though, Nick, Bill and Steven at UNC this past season, so that should definitely help when it comes to his technical refinement and his overall profile in terms of character when it comes to being ready for the NFL. So I think some of these North Carolina guys are going to be a little bit more prepared in that regard, and that can lead to them being able to come in and thrive as a rookie in the NFL. I think for the Commanders, Trey Amos, Mikey Sanders still are going to be good corners for them. They're both on rookie contracts, though, and behind them, there's not really much that you're really happy with. So I think they need to improve this cornerback depth. And again, Dixon having versatility could allow them in Dan Quinn's defense to have a handful of different options. So I think this makes a lot of sense for them.
I like this pick here at 147. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Dixon's a really solid player. Played in a versatile role at North Carolina. Played corner, played slot, played in the box. They moved him around. He was really solid and man. He got a lot of reps in a couple different positions. This past year, played 400 snaps, a little bit banged up at times. Was pretty solid in his 200 coverage snaps. Gave up only 1 touchdown and 250 yards on 26 targets. I think that was really solid. He was pretty good the year before that as well, where he was solid, had an interception in 2024, gave up 2 touchdowns on 51 targets. I like what he can do. I think he's a player that's got a lot of potential. I think he certainly learned from solid coaches like you alluded to there at 6'1", 185. I think he certainly works really well. One of the older players in this class at 24 years old, but I think he's a guy that really has some high potential and profiles pretty well. This is not a secondary that's too bad so far. I like some of the pieces they have. So adding another solid piece in here that could be solid at corner, add some good depth for Trey Amos and Mikey Sanistro, I think is not a bad idea at 147. I like this pick.
I moved to them looking to replace their center. Tyler Biadasz got cut earlier this offseason. He had a respectable season this past year, and he's still a young player. I mean, the Chargers instantly signed him to a 3-year deal. So, I mean, I think he was still a quality player, but they decided to move on and spend the money elsewhere. So I think center is going to be something they look to attend to, maybe early, maybe late. Matt Golban from Michigan State. This is a guy that was a multi-year starter across college football, 6'4", 312, a pretty stout anchor, rarely allows interior penetration, pretty versatile across the interior offensive line as well. The run block technique really checks out. Has some weak lateral movement. Arm length isn't all that ideal. And this past year was actually his first full season at center, so maybe some growing pains still to be endured by him. But this is a position that they need to address at some point, Nick. And I think they have some type of game plan at center. We'll see if Goldman fits that. But what do you make of them focusing on a big position in need all of a sudden?
Goldman's a very versatile player, and I think he could be a potentially solid piece in the sixth round for this Washington team. He's played all over the offensive line. He's played every position except left tackle. Had 600 snaps at right guard. In his 2023 had 100 snaps at right tackle that same year. Had 100 snaps at center in 2024 and 700 at left guard. And then this past season he had 730 snaps at center and only played center for Michigan State. They moved him around a lot. They got a lot out of him, and he was really versatile for that team. 6'4", 312. So I think drafting this guy, you can move him and play him in a lot of different positions. Certainly, most likely going to play him at center, but I think he has a lot of potential to play elsewhere if need be. He's really solid across the board. He gave up 2 sacks on 700 snaps this past season, was really solid. He gave up 2 QB hurries as well, a massive decrease from years prior. I think he can be really solid in the interior. I think he's got a lot of room to grow and could be a big key asset potentially. I think taking him at 187 is not a bad pick.
And to cap things off, they got two more selections here. Isaiah Nawakbe, a safety from SMU in the sixth round. This is a guy who was a productive ball hawk, shows strong pursuit, pretty instinctive in zone coverage as well, pretty physical finisher. He can go in there and compete for what's not the worst room in the world, but not the best either. Quan Martin's a guy who at times was good for this team, especially against the run. Jeremy Reeves has been around a long time and has given them quality play. But you're hoping you can find a diamond in the rough, and Milwaukee might be able to fit that. He's played a lot of football at SMU, a multi-year starter as well. And then another receiver in round seven, Dane Key, 6'3", 210. Doesn't give you much speed or yard after catch ability. Pretty average athletic profile, really. But he's got great hands. I love the focus. He's good at coming down with the ball, even with a defender all over him. And he does show some nice wiggle on those in-breaking routes. So I think this is a guy that can be a good football player at the next level, at least as a third or a fourth option. What do you make of those two selections to round things out?
Milwaukee was okay at SMU at times last year, 725 defensive snaps, played 800 plus. The year prior that they moved around, they got a lot of versatility at him. He was solid, certainly played deeper in the defensive setup. He was pretty solid. For SMU at times, I think he's a player that could profile into a decent asset in the NFL, 6 foot, 6'1", 205. He had some solid experiences, had 68 total tackles last year, 77 prior to that. I think it's just good depth. And Dane Key was okay at Nebraska, certainly didn't blow me away, and I don't think he necessarily blows me away as a prospect either, which is why he obviously falls to the seventh round. He was okay at times, about 40 receptions on 64 targets, 450 yards, and 5 scores. I think he's a player that they can get something out of, 6'3", 210. Certainly maybe a bit of a versatile receiver. And again, you're just kind of adding some depth for a wide receiving room that is kind of weak on paper and missing some of that top end talent. Obviously, he's not a top end guy, Dinky, but I think he's solid to add some decent depth to a wide receiver room that could use some help. You saw it last year. They were banged up. They needed help here. I think bringing a guy like Dane Key in the seventh round is not the worst idea in the world.
Now, this is a Commanders team. Again, they only have 6 selections. This is not going to be a flashy draft. They're going to have to hit on the first and the third round selection to really feel happy about what they accomplished. But for the most part, if you're a fan, Nick, this is just boring and it's unfortunate, especially since your team did struggle last year. Of course, you had injuries and you weren't looking as good as you did 2 years ago and whatnot. So you know what? If I'm a fan of Washington, I hate to be in this position, but I'm going to be very happy if we can walk around with another alpha pass catcher and potentially a game-changing defensive tackle as well. What happens on day three? It's obviously again not flashy and it's not going to be very exciting. So for Washington, this is just going to be an interesting draft for them, but I think there's definitely still a lot of promise because there's going to be good football players across this entire draft.
There is some solid promise here, and obviously Washington fans will probably not be super happy during the draft process. There's not a whole lot going on. It's gonna be a quiet one for them. Hopefully next year when the draft is hosted in the nation's capital, there'll be a little bit more flash from the Commanders. They'll be able to do a little bit more and have a little more fun with it, and have some more picks in that draft and be a little more creative here. I think Tate would be a really solid guy at number 7 for this team. He could do a lot. I think they really need a receiver. They need to beef up that receiving room. I think Halton's a phenomenal asset at defensive tackle that could really be good for this team. That could use a little bit of depth there. I think you kind of fill in two massive holes with your only picks in the first 4 rounds. On day 3, you go out there and fill some other needs. You fill some needs in the offensive line, fill some needs in the secondary, and that wide receiver again. Definitely going to be attacking those 3 position groups, I think, a lot. Certainly those 4 position groups, beg your pardon. Wide receiver, defensive line, offensive line, and in the secondary, kind of fill those up. I think they feel good about the rest of their units overall. This is a good team that's going to not do a ton here, but they could tweak, add some pieces, and really get themselves back in contention in the NFC East.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.